Police agencies across Michigan get daily calls about domestic violence, so training and understanding by officers is crucial.
Often victims have been isolated, made to feel crazy and physically abused, but as Carolyn Clifford shows us tonight, the men and women in blue can be the lifeline to freedom instead of the grave.
Tonight in our series, Breaking Free from the Horrors of Domestic Violence, we tackle how the cycle of violence is broken. It requires an exit strategy. So we are lifting the voices of survivors, judges, and police chiefs, whose officers often go behind closed doors to protect the victims. Behind the door of every police agency is a battle against domestic violence. Domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women, more than car accidents, muggings, and rapes combined. And no one is immune.
He said that he wanted me to suffer.
One time he chased us down the road in his car, like almost hitting us off the side of the road.
He murdered her, and he then committed suicide.
Shockwaves through Pontiac last year when Dr. Calandra Green, a beloved member of the community, was gunned down. Her husband pulled the trigger.
There were no bruises. There were no outward arguments.
Green is one of many who have suffered in silence. We were alarmed to hear domestic violence is the #1 crime in just about every community we visit. What kind of crime have you seen here in Southfield?
Our main issues in Southfield is domestic violence.
We've had 2 homicides early this year, but they were both domestic violence.
So we invited chiefs from 3 of the biggest counties, Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb, to sit down with me to discuss this epidemic. Combined, their officers have responded to nearly 2,500 calls this year alone, and it is one of the most dangerous runs a police officer can make.
You're going into somebody's private home, you don't know what you're walking into, and you don't know what weapons they may have access to.
In recent years, 22% of police officers who died in the line of duty were responding to a call of domestic violence. Barricaded gunman situations often begin with a report of abuse.
The SWAT team is called upon to negotiate a peaceful resolution. In most cases, we've been very successful in that, but there have been other cases where either suicide or homicides take place.
I can just tell you over 26 years, I've seen a lot of trauma, and I've seen a lot of devastation in families.
And there are risk factors and warning signs. Weapons in the home, alcohol abuse, and according to a national study,
once it comes to a point where you're being strangled, homicide is in the near future.
Southfield PD now keeps forms to track strangulation cases for this very reason.
We also look for opportunities to prosecute offenders sometimes when the victim is unwilling to. There's provisions within the law to do that.
But here's the question: how do we stop it?
It stops by awareness of the community. It stops by having resources available for the victims.
Hey! Oh! Domestic violence has got to go!
For 5 years, Chief Barron has led a walk against domestic violence.
We come together as a community to bring awareness of domestic violence.
Diaji Hill is a survivor who walks to empower others. Her abuser was never held accountable.
It kind of ended with the guy kidnapping me, holding me at gunpoint.
Chief Judge of 46th District Court, Sheila Johnson, who says she sees these cases repeatedly in her courtroom, comes to promote change.
We need to help those abusers understand that some of the things that they're doing, they don't think is abuse, but we want to rehabilitate them as well.
Experts say a victim may go back 7 or 8 times before finally breaking free.
They feel that they're in love, this isn't going to happen again.
There's so many emotions involved. She's leaving potentially violence, but what is she heading towards? Homelessness? Not being able to put food on the table?
Can you pinpoint anything as to why in 2024 domestic violence is still such a big issue in communities and getting worse?
That's a tough question. I can tell you that it really, for me, it revolves a lot around control. There's been so much education around it, and it's fairly disappointing to see that there hasn't been some improvement.
They all agree it is critical to hold the abuser accountable.
The criminal justice system is so much larger than just the police department, so we work hand in hand with our prosecutor's office.
And when calling on police, it's important for victims to feel safe, to be heard and believed.
We train our police officers to understand and recognize the dynamics, to put themselves in the victim's shoes.
So there are advocates available and resources for help with a planned exit strategy. It is also vital to document abuse, and the community plays a role too. If you see something, say something or call 911.
We applaud you, in the station for bringing this much-needed topic to the forefront.
It gives us a chance to talk about what we see on an everyday basis.
Today solidifies her spirit is alive and thriving.
And while it's too late for victims like Dr. Green, her family has created this scholarship fund for nursing students so others learn from her tragedy.
To make sure that her spirit is alive in the community is why I fight so hard to make sure that she's gonna never be forgotten.
Dr. Green's legacy will certainly live on. So many people felt her impact in the community, and it is critical to remember what Chief Barron said about once a victim of domestic violence has been choked by their abuser, the attempt to murder may not be far behind, and that is new information that we've never heard before. Don't forget, confidential help is available around the clock. You can call or text Michigan's Domestic Violence Hotline. The number is right there on your screen, 866-VOICE-DV. So important to get help. And don't forget, tomorrow in our series, Breaking Free, it can take 6 to 8 months for abuse victims to find safe shelter, and that can be the difference between life and death, as it was for a woman whose husband killed their 4 children right in front of her before she could escape. That is tomorrow, right here on 7 News Detroit.
Your story really highlights how prevalent this is throughout every community. It's not limited to one area.
Absolutely not. I mean, when we did our check-in with the chief segments, nearly every police chief that I spoke to one-on-one said domestic violence was the #1 crime in their community. And so, you know, you heard one of the chiefs say it's not getting better, but we all have to play a role in it. You know, men at home need to talk to other men and teach their boys not to hit women or girls.
Yeah, very hard stories to hear, but so important.
So very important.
And raising awareness. Thank you, Carolyn.
Absolutely.
And you can find Carolyn's full stories and several domestic violence resources right now at WXYZ.com. Dave?